Today is Friday, October 13th, 2017. It's 3 p.m. at the Ruth Patrick Science and Education Center at USC Aiken. I'm Sarah Cundith, interviewing student veteran Daniel Craigo, and assisting is Marjorie George. Good afternoon. Thank you for taking the time to be here. I'd like to start off with a few questions about your life before joining the military.
Okay.
When and where were you born?
December 8, 1982 is when I was born. I was born in Greenville, South Carolina.
And is that where you grew up?
I grew up in Fountain Inn, South Carolina.
What was Fountain Inn like?
It was mom and pop town before there was Walmarts and Kmarts and stuff like that. So it's really small town feel.
And can you tell me about your family?
Yeah. As far as what?
Your parents and siblings.
Okay. Well, my mother was a coal miner's daughter. She grew up in the mountains, and my father grew up in the country area, lived on the same road his whole life. It was actually named after our family, Craigo Road. And both uneducated. They made it as far as high school. My sister was the same way. Got out in high school, and then they so we were a very close-knit family. All the Craigos lived on Craigo Road, all the sons anyway. But it was always, family reunions and things like that were always really warm, as close-knit families are. But that small-town feel kind of wore thin with me after a while, and that's what made me join the military.
Okay. What were you involved in during high school, activities and such?
Nothing really. I really just focused on graduating, trying to get out. I did a lot of automotive stuff, auto body. I did odd jobs on the side with auto body and auto mechanic work here and there. I was a manager at a couple of places at a really young age. I didn't really like authority too much, so I had about 13 jobs before I joined the military. Yeah.
What did you do following high school graduation?
Oh, man. At the time, I was in kind of a halfway serious relationship with my now wife. I kind of just muddled around Greenville. Again, like I said, I was bouncing around job to job, mostly mechanic work though, just automotive mechanic stuff. And again, it grew really old on me, and I wanted a change of scenery.
Because that's when you decided to join the Air Force?
Correct.
All right, so next I have some questions about your military life.
Okay.
How old were you when you enlisted in the Air Force?
I was 22 years old, and I entered in on a program. They probably don't do it anymore, but it was called delayed entry, and essentially you met all the requirements for entry into the military. You signed an oath. Mm-hmm. You processed in at MEPS, which for me was in Columbia, South Carolina, and then you waited until a job came up on your dream sheet. Your dream sheet essentially is just a job listing of, you would list 6 different jobs, and if any of those jobs popped up, then you would go to basic training for that specific job.
Do you recall any of those jobs, any that you had on your list, your dream sheet?
Yeah. Number 1 was aircraft propulsion maintenance. So basically an airplane engine mechanic is what my number 1 job was. I scored really high because you had to take an ASVAB test or aptitude test beforehand, and I scored really high in mechanical on that part of the test. So I was more geared towards working with my hands and working with machinery. So aircraft maintenance was another one. It's like sheet metal work. Number 3, can't quite remember now. And then about number 5 was non-destructive inspection. Had no clue what it was. People told me it was a really good job on the outside of the military. I didn't really know. So I had that on my list. It took a year and a half This is 18 months I waited until one of those jobs popped, which was non-destructive inspection.
Okay. And why did you decide to enlist in the Air Force?
Well, I decided I wanted a change of scenery. One of the driving factors, right around that time, 9/11 happened. So when the terrorists hit the World Trade Centers, I initially ran to go in, and I wanted to enlist in the Marines. Tried to enlist in the Marines, and I took a pre-exam that the recruiter gave me, and afterwards he pulled me to the side and he said that you don't belong in the Marine Corps. And he said you need to go down to the Air Force or Navy office where they turn people like you into career individuals. I guess it was a math question. Then afterwards he asked me, how did you figure that math question out on the test? And I told him, and he says, yeah, you don't belong in the Marines. So.
What did your family and friends think of your decision to join the Air Force?
It was 50-50. Like I said, my mom and dad, they were fairly uneducated. They were still smart people. They just they did not like the fact that I was joining the military at all. I was the youngest of two children, so I was kind of treated as the baby my whole life, and they did not like that at all. And at the time, I'd just gotten married, so I married my high school sweetheart, and then 1 week later, after we got back from the honeymoon, I shipped off to basic training. But yeah, most of the family, it was 50-50. A couple of my uncles had served, so they were right behind. They were encouraging me. And one of my other cousins, actually, we were like brothers growing up, he joined as well, the Air Force. He's still in, as a matter of fact.
And basic training was at Lackland Air Force Base?
That's correct. Very, very hot in Texas.
How would you describe that Air Force Base?
Well, the plane ride in, everybody was very excited. All the airmen, you were just gung-ho, you're ready to go. A lot of us were just young and dumb and didn't know any better, We made so much noise on the plane, in fact, people were complaining, and, it is what it is. We were just really excited to start that chapter, but when we landed, it's kind of blurry, but when we landed, they put us all on a bus, and we all took the bus to the training facility. It was dark. It was really early in the morning, and they got us there, and it was dark out. Everybody was yelling at us. It was chaos. A lot of pick your bags up, put your bags down, things like that. Just very remedial things that you wouldn't think you would crack under pressure doing, but they have it down to a science. They just make you do very silly stuff, move here, move there, seeing if you can follow orders. And the slightest, disobedience was met with swift and harsh punishment right away. So they just let you know who was boss.
What was the most difficult part of basic training?
Being away from my wife. That was probably the hardest part. I couldn't really write to her. First 3 weeks, our TI, TI's training instructor, he wouldn't allow us to write home for the first 3 weeks. It was kind of a way, I guess, to break ties, so that we had to focus on our training. My wife wrote me every day, though, and every time they did mail call, he would throw the mail to you, and it was kind of it was a mixture of things. Like, you felt really good getting mail, but at the same time, he wouldn't usually let us read the mail right then and there. So you would just get the mail, and you had to hold on to it. So it was like this thing, and I put it in my foot locker, and I'm like, man, okay, I'm waiting until Saturday until I can read my mail from my wife. So, there was that. You had something to look forward to, at least.
So you could receive mail, but you couldn't send any?
We were very crafty. There was times where you had free time, and free time being not really like to have fun. Now you can have your cell phone in basic. Back when I was in, they locked all of your personal belongings away, and you were not allowed to touch any of your personal belongings, to include cell phones. But we would go on marches and they would let the class leaders march us around base. And one of the class leaders, really good guy, I still remember his name, Tropiano, he allowed us to write letters, and when we would march around specific days, he would march us next to where a mailbox was at. And so as he was doing that, he made it look very official, and everybody handed him the packet of letters. He would have us, do our facing movements, and we would halt in front of the mailbox, and then he would grab the letters and put the parcel inside of the mailbox. It looked very official to us anyway. If the TI saw us, I'm sure they would have smoked us.
Do you think basic training changed you, and how so?
Yes, very much so. I was actually one of the older. By the time I entered, like I said, I enlisted when I was around 22, and it took 18 months for me to go in. It was in July, so it was really hot. But so I was 23 at the time. I was one of the oldest individuals. I think there was one other person older than me. He was 28. So I already had I was more mature than most of the guys that were in there. The only thing I lacked is I had a problem with authority. So,
as you mentioned.
Yeah, that was a natural, that was a bad decision on my part, to have that type of mentality going in, but they broke me of it. It also developed me as a person, very much so. Allowed me to mingle with other people that I probably would have never mingled with in my life growing up in a small rural area. Especially in South Carolina, you never knew, or I never met a Muslim in my life. And in basic training, you're just kind of smushed together with all these different people from all over the country, all different backgrounds, all different beliefs, and you all have to come together and focus on one thing, and to basically make it through basic training alive is how you have to think of it. But I remember one individual in particular, Huck. He was from Bangladesh, and he was a Muslim, and I thought that was one of the hardest. That was very admirable to me. I mean, a lot of people at the time, the stigma with 9/11 was that Muslims are bad, and nobody really thought outside of that. But talking with him and talking with his imam, they had one imam on the base, and they allowed me to go to one of their services. So I went into the service and just talked to him. I mean, it just opens your eyes to a lot of different things that you were essentially ignorant to at the time. So that helped me grow personally.
And was basic training what you expected it to be?
Yes and no. I thought it was going to be, I guess, more like some stuff in the movies. And it turned out it was a lot different. A lot different. A lot of running, a lot of yelling. So in that aspect, I guess no. But I think it was better, ultimately. It built me up as an individual. It was probably the best shape I'll ever be in my life, and the TI told us that. There was actually, I think I went in, you have to meet a certain weight requirement. I went in at 182 pounds, and that was the max weight that I could be for my height. And when I went in, I dropped 32 pounds, and I was actually fairly lean at 182 pounds. And I dropped 32 pounds in the first 3 weeks that I was there, and they were worried that I'd lost so much weight that it was unhealthy. They thought I was going to have to go to the hospital. So I was about 1 pound away from them putting me on an eating waiver, which I would have loved because they just put you to the side and you get to eat at your own leisure. You could eat donuts. That was the other thing. They wouldn't let us eat anything. No junk food, no fried foods, no nothing. And you had to go right in front of it. So chow line was the worst. So you go in and you line up, and when you lined up for chow, you had to sit there and read a book. So your nose was down the whole time, and then you'd put your books away when your element was called. And your element's essentially a column of people, a line. And so your line, you march in, and you get your tray, and you put your hands on your tray. You just look at the food. You tell the lunch ladies what you want. And then they put it on a plate, grab it, put it on your tray. Hold your tray firmly with both hands. Well, they teach you facing movements. You're not allowed to do facing movements while you're holding your tray. And they call it a snake pit, but you're forced to go past what they call the snake pit. It's where all the TIs sit at lunch, and they're watching you. They're just looking to pick somebody out that's doing something, or that's some guy that looks weird, and they're going to pick you, and they will roast you in front of everybody. And it's not funny either. It's not like joking or anything. They are looking to exploit any kind of vulnerability you have to try and just, beat you down. But luckily, I never had that issue. I never got picked by them. I kind of skated by in that sense. But the chow hall thing was very complicated. It was this complex dance. You had, after you got through the line, you had to go sit down, and there was a specific lane you had to go to sit at your table. And then once you sat, you had to wait. And you waited until everybody got to your table, and then you started drinking first. You had 2 cups of water, 1 cup of Powerade. You had to drink all of your drinks, flip your cups over, and your hands could not be down here, hands could not be in your pocket. One hand on the table, the other hand eating. It was very regimented. You eat as fast as you can. At the time, that's what they told us, but that's not really how it went on after the fact. But once the table to your left was finished, you had to stop and get up. Didn't matter how much you had left on your plate. Did not matter. You had to get up and go. That's part of the reason why I probably lost 32 pounds as well, is because I couldn't eat as much as I wanted. But it was very regimented. Again, it was about order amongst the chaos. Towards the end, it got to where everybody learned that if everyone would take their time, everybody would have enough time to eat. So once a class got a little seasoned, or a squadron got a little seasoned, they would learn that. And then when a new squadron would come in, you would try and teach them how to do things so that they wouldn't mess your mealtime up. But it got to a point where I was losing so much weight, and I was trying to pack as many calories in as I could. I was putting peanut butter on everything. And when I mean everything, I was putting it on pizza. And they had this little round pizza, and I'm not even thinking. They had us integrated too with female flights as well. So the female flights would they mixed in with us a few times. But I started eating this concoction of peanut butter and pizza, and one of the females in our sister flight began to vomit, and I kept eating because I didn't care. I mean, that's how your mentality is. You're just trying to cram calories so you can run the next morning.
Wow. Next, I have questions about your service.
Okay.
After basic training. Where did you serve?
My first duty station was Valdosta, Georgia. It was actually called Moody Air Force Base. It's in Valdosta, Georgia. The land was donated by a man named Parker Green. It's a huge plot of land. But that was my first duty station. I worked on several different airframes. Airframes are aircraft. There were HH-60s, which is a helicopter, C-130s, cargo airplane, large cargo airplane. Well, the Air Force is kind of small, but A-10s was later, but T-38s were there first, which were trainer jets. T-6 Texans, which are the trainer jets they used for heavy pilots, the guys flying like what you would see like commercial pilots flying people around in 747s today. They start them on the small little prop planes. So I started working on those at Moody, and then I transitioned from there. I was there around 3 years, and then I went to Elmendorf Air Force Base in Anchorage, Alaska. That's where I got exposed to F-22s and E-3s and several other different aircraft that I hadn't seen before.
What was a typical day like for you?
Oh man, when I first got in, it was a little rough at first, because when you get to your first duty station, well, you go from basic training and then you go to tech school. So tech school, I was there for 13 weeks. And tech school is where you get your initial training. It's almost like college. You go there and you're going to class every day. You march to and from, back and forth. It's not as stressful, though, as basic. And then you leave from there to go to, you get your duty assignments there, and then you leave to go to your first duty station. So once you get to your first base, like when I got to Moody, you meet your command, or you meet your NCO. They usually send an NCO or non-commissioned officer
Okay.
to come pick you up, and he takes you around the base, starts getting you in processed. But typical day in the shop was we'd show up every morning and start doing process controls. Again, I was in non-destructive inspection. It's almost like a laboratory environment. So we'd have to do process controls on all the systems in the shop, and after that, we would start work. We would do call-out work. We'd look at any jobs that were pending on the flight line, which is where they park all the aircraft, and then we'd go out and do work on the flight line. Depending on what it was, we would have to check out certain kits, calibrate things, and go out and do inspections. We mainly look for cracks and structural problems with aircraft.
Okay. Is there anything else about your military service that you'd like to touch on?
Probably the honor guard. I did an honor guard service while I was at Moody for a little over a year. Honor guard was that's a group of guys that do active and veteran funerals.
Okay.
So they render the customs and courtesies for those funerals. That was probably one of the most, I would say, forming type of things for me. It formed a lot of, I guess, professionalism, and instilled a lot of professionalism in me, because you had to be very, very regimented. It was extremely solemn, but it was. I mean, you were honestly giving the highest honor to an individual when they passed away. And since we were down in Valdosta, Georgia, this probably sounds morbid, but we were down in Valdosta, Georgia, and a lot of people retire in Florida. So we had a lot of funerals. Did a lot of funeral services for all walks of life. Had a couple active duty ones. Those are the hardest ones. The active duty ones are, because typically they're going to be younger, and their bigger services, more extravagant. And I'd say one of the worst ones was when we had to accept a guy's body off the plane. That was different. It was me and one other guy, and we were there to receive the body. We had to put, they come out, I mean, it's really cold. They come out in a big wooden crate, and they have to bust the crate off on the flight line. People are still on the plane. They make them stay on the plane while we do the service, though. They broke the crate down, and we placed the flag over for him, and that sticks with me. That'll probably stick with me the rest of my life. So.
And why did you leave the military?
A few different reasons. One, I was trying to go to officer training school, and I applied, or I was going to apply, and I went through roughly 5 years of schooling and through attaining waivers, because you can't be a pilot and have 2400 vision like I do, because I'm legally blind without my glasses. So I had to get the eyesight waiver, age waiver, and several other things to include a flying class physical. Got all that done. And we went to go and submit the package, and it takes 12 months to actually have the package accepted and approved. And they told me they had submitted it, and about 9 months into it, 10 months, they contacted me and basically said that they had not submitted the package. The individual that was in charge of that had deployed and never sent it off, in fact, at all, and told them that she had. So due to someone's complacency, I didn't get to realize what I wanted to do. So I decided at that point it was probably best for me to seek employment elsewhere. So I looked to get out of the military. I was released early because of that. That was part of the reason why they allowed me to get out early, was because of the mishandling of that type of thing for your career. So I got out after 7.5 years, honorable discharge. And part of it was too, is I had a good job lined up in Georgia. A lot of military members, they don't have things lined up for them before they get out of service, and it's kind of a sad thing. They have a TAPS program, a transition assistance program for military members trying to get out, but it's kind of a weak program. It doesn't really help us at all. But I ended up having all of that in place beforehand, a job and a place to live. So.
And what was the transition back to civilian life like?
It's still hard. And that's, I left in January of 2013. It's still a rough time sometimes. I miss putting the uniform on, though, overall. I mean, it's a weird thing, but honestly, that's probably the hardest thing, is the uniform. And I still to this day don't know why. But, there's things that, like civilians, I say civilians, as anyone who wasn't armed services, there's a lot of jokes that veterans will talk to each other about. They're more like inside jokes. Whereas if I were to blurt something out in a crowd of college kids here, they probably wouldn't understand what I'm talking about. They'd look at me like I'm some crazy old dude that, whatever. That just is what it is. But that's hard too, because if you're not around people that are in the military and you make a comment, it makes you look like the weird guy.
Oh.
So.
When did you attend college?
When?
Yes.
Well, you get credit for throughout the career. They have a very good professional development program in the Air Force. And when I made E5, which is Staff Sergeant, they made me go to what they call ALS, or Airman Leadership School. And that's almost like college. They send you through, it's management classes, essentially, of how to become a leader. And you learn all types of management stuff. And that started some of my college credits through the Community College of the Air Force. Then after that, I started college, I want to say in 2006 at Moody Air Force Base. I was doing online classes through Embry-Riddle. And then I was also doing some in-person classes, but they were still distance learning, because the Embry-Riddle has 2 brick-and-mortar campuses, one in Prescott, Arizona, and one in Daytona Beach, Florida.
Okay.
So.
And you enrolled at USC Aiken because it's an easy transfer to USC Columbia, correct?
That's correct.
And you plan on majoring in mechanical engineering?
That's right.
How did you choose this major?
It marries up nicely with my current career path, because I deal a lot in science and metallurgy and things like that. So mechanical is just a very broad-based engineering discipline, so it just seemed like a natural choice.
Do you think your experience in the military influenced your degree choice?
No, not really. I think my experience in the civilian world did.
Oh.
In the military, I probably would have chosen aerospace engineering. That's what my other degree is in professional aeronautics. I mean, it's an aerospace degree. So no, I'd say the civilian world really influenced that a lot.
You told me earlier that the transition from military to college is easier than the transition from life to college.
Yeah.
Will you expand on that?
Yeah, military to college is fairly easy. I mean, the military gives you a lot of different opportunities. I mean, we have the GI Bill, but when you're on active duty, they have TA or tuition assistance, so you don't have to use your GI Bill.
Oh.
So you can honestly go to college on base or even off base at a local college for free. And while you're getting that, then later on, if you want an advanced degree, if you get out, you can use your GI Bill. The TA is there for up to a master's degree.
Oh, wow.
So you can actually get a few different degrees if you play your cards right. So the military really caters to that. They want a well-rounded, the Air Force does anyway, they want a well-rounded airman. They want somebody who volunteers. You have to volunteer to get promoted in the Air Force. You have to do extracurricular stuff like going to college. But volunteering is a big thing too. But then coming to civilian world, you have a lot more free time in the military. They cater to you because they know that their wages aren't high. They don't pay a whole lot. So they give you a lot of stuff, right? They give you a lot of benefits that make you comfortable. And one of those is helping you with that type of thing, being able to go to college when you need to, giving you family time. When you go in the civilian world, it's on you, right? They pay you for your time to come to work. You work 40, 50, 60 hours a week. You may not have the time, or you may not have the inclination to go to the gym. I don't much these days. Um, and so it's a lot harder. It's a whole lot harder because it's not as regimented. It's more or less in the military they tell you how to do things. In the civilian world, you're kind of left to your own devices. So there's a lot more things. Freedom sometimes is a bad thing, and so that's what was hard for me, is that coming out of working a full-time job, or still working a full-time job, and now I have a family. At the time when I first started college in the military, I did not have a family. I just had my wife, so I didn't have any kids. Now I have kids, and juggling all of that stuff it's a difficult task.
In what ways did the military prepare you for college?
Oh, it's the regiment. I mean, just putting you through hell and expecting you to be able to do everything correct, attention to detail, integrity, and all of those things that they instill in you, certain values that the military services give you, helps you in college.
Do you think USC Aiken is a good place to be a student veteran?
I would say so, yeah. I haven't been here that long, but I would say it's a really good campus for veterans. Yeah.
How do you think you fit into the college environment?
I stick out like a sore thumb here. I mean, that just is what it is, though. I'm an older guy on campus. I got confused for a guy's dad during the campus tour. I tried to get him to play along with me, but he wouldn't do it. So that's a veteran thing, you know. That's another thing, you know. I try to make a joke with a young guy who's here and say that I'm his dad, and he didn't like it too much.
Will you tell me about your family now that you have kids?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I have 2 children, boy and a girl. I got lucky and got one of each, so I'm done after that. No more.
Would you encourage one of them to join the military if they expressed interest?
That's a tough question. Honestly, I would probably not push them towards it. And it's mainly because the military, it's a great thing for those who need it at that point in their lives. If, one of my kids were unruly and, they were just a hard child to deal with and they wanted to join the military, it'd probably do them good. But if I saw another path for them, as far as going to college, getting them straight out of high school and going straight to college, that's the way I'm going to push my children. My family didn't really do that. They didn't value education. They wanted me to attain a job at a factory or be a welder, which those are all admirable things. It's fine, but that's not what I wanted to do for my life. So I wanted to go to college, and the military gave me the avenue to do that. So I think for my children, I'm going to try and set them up a little bit differently, so that they don't have to choose between that or staying in a place they don't want to be.
What do you like to do in your spare time, if there is any?
I don't have any right now. Between commuting back and forth and from work here in my house, just 3 hours commute every day that I come here, and 40-hour work week, and sleep time, I only have 16 hours roughly, and that's not even after I do my homework, so that eats up the rest of the time. But hobbies before I started back to college, I really like hiking, even though I don't look like it. I really love to hike. I'm almost like a pack mule. I'll put a 40, 50-pound pack on. I'll get lost in the woods. Just did the northern part of the 100-mile wilderness. Actually got hurt halfway through. We had to get out, but we did about 50 miles. Mount Katahdin being the summit, we did that first, and then hiked halfway through. So that's one of my passions. I really like hiking.
What are your plans once you obtain your degree?
I'm not really sure on that. The company I'm working for right now, Southern Nuclear, they recognize engineering degrees. Currently, I don't have an engineering degree, so it'll certainly set me in a different career path within Southern. But I don't know. There's different options available out there. I just went to Italy last week and witnessed. I'm very interested in fusion reaction or reactors, And actually the shop I went to go oversee, they had pieces of a fusion reactor in their bay, so I got to actually realize one of my nerd dreams was to be able to go and look at a fusion reactor, so that was really awesome. So I might end up trying to go down that path, or maybe SpaceX, one of the two.
What do you see yourself doing 10 years from now?
Oh, probably what I just said, working towards that, or I mean even being a scientist. In my career field, it's very, very small. Non-destructive inspection, most people don't even know what it is. I didn't. When I joined the military, there's a guy with a hard hat on a construction site. That was the Air Force's picture of non-destructive inspection. But you don't work on a construction site, you work on aircraft. So even the Air Force didn't know what our job was. They have a scientist laboratory for non-destructive inspection in Charlotte, North Carolina. I might even land there, I don't know. We'll just see how that works out.
What is your best piece of advice to a recent high school graduate looking to join the Air Force?
I'd say if you're really serious about joining the Air Force and you're 18, go to college first, get a degree, and then think about whether or not you want to join the service. Or do ROTC and go in as an officer. It's going to teach you a lot more skills before you go in. If you go in as a young airman, typically they set those guys up for, I won't say failure, they put them in dorms, and it's more like college life than anything, partying and all that, especially if you're in maintenance. But they do have good programs for enlisted if you decide to go in the medical field. There's a lot of opportunities, I would say. I wouldn't believe everything a recruiter tells you either, because they will lie to you. So that would be the biggest bit of advice. Find another veteran, talk to them about it, just talk through the whole process. I've mentored several 18-year-olds that were wanting to go in and help them along their way and kind of shine the light on some of the lies that recruiters will sell them. So.
Are there any other thoughts you'd like to touch on?
No.
All right. Well, thank you very much for your time, and thank you for your service.
All right.